Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to Rules of Engagement. Today's episode is going to be Mechanics of the Bazaar. I think it's going to be an especially great episode. We've got some great games picked out for you guys. But before I get into that, let's give a breakdown of our Rules of Engagement weekly schedule. So this show airs every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Every Monday we've got Talking Tactics. That's where we take a look at pro games, break down the tactics they use, and show you how back at home you can use those tactics to enhance your game regardless of the race or situation you're in. Tuesday, Developing Fundamentals. That's where we go over all the beginning parts of the game. It's really great for introductory players to kind of learn how to approach playing a 1v1 multiplayer game of StarCraft. It's also good if you're maybe hit a brick wall in your improvement, or you just want to go back and make sure there's nothing really critical in your play that you're missing. One thing about Tuesday, it's a great VOD series. So those of you guys who have friends who are just wanting to get into StarCraft, you want to show them what it's about, how the game works, direct them over to MLG.tv. And from there, you can click on Rules of Engagement and scroll down. You can find all the Rules of Engagement episodes. Tuesday's episodes are especially great for beginning players. Wednesday, that's today, it's going to be Mechanics of the Bazaar. Again, professional level games. This time, I'm going to do a little bit of wonky strategy, so we're going to get some fun stuff there. And of course, tomorrow is Community Critique. This is where you submit your replays to me, MajorLeagueGaming.com/replays. It's a pretty painless form to fill out. Send them over and we look at the community replays on Thursday. And also a reminder, at the end of every single episode, we do question and answer. So tweet me your questions. My Twitter is @ISAxlav. Send me those questions. We'll get to them at the end of the episode. But let's just jump straight into Wednesday's episode, Mechanics of the Bazaar. Today we're going to start off with a 2-base mech TVP, a little bit of a funky build there. It was used by Marine King in, I think this is a Home Story Cup qualifier from months back against MC. And then we are going to go on to a Nidus, using a Nidus against the timing attack. From a Zerg perspective, D-Killer versus Grubby. Then we're going to take a look at a Carrier Rush against Terran. This was used from an IEM playoff tournament, actually. I believe it was, I'm trying to remember which IEM, it was GamesCon. MC versus Kos, a really, really fun build. It's going to be great to look through these. Let's just start with the 2-base mech TVP. So we're at here right now. The map is Terminus. This was played right before Terminus got cycled out of the map pool. And we have Marine King over here on the right side, and of course MC's opponent on the left side. Now we're going to start this game a little bit more advanced. A couple of things to point out of what happened so far is the build Marine King opened up with. Of course, if you want to check out the exact replay, once the VODs are up, should be within an hour or two of the end of the show. There'll be a link in those VODs to where you can find the replay. But he opened with a barracks, then a refinery, then a command center. Okay, this barracks, then he built this refinery over here, this one, and then he built his command center on the low ground. Then he got a reactor on his barracks. Okay, then he built a factory, and then of course from there he continued to just put the tech lab on the factory, get more gas, get 3 more factories. He stayed very defensive the whole game. Okay, so he's just been hanging out here building Marines out of reactor, getting tanks out of his tech lab so far. His opponent MC did a standard 1-gate expansion into some 3-gate pressure. Of course, as soon as the pressure saw these tanks, had to back away. So this is a great build for defending any type of aggression. It's very, very safe opening against aggression. And it's also very hard to scout, especially if your opponent opens with aggression like MC did. Their observer, they have to wait for an observer to actually figure out exactly what you're doing. So they can see 1 or 2 tanks, but they don't know you're going full mech because a lot of turns open 1 or 2 tanks to cover a fast third into more standard play. So by the time they find out, hopefully it's a little bit too late. So let's talk about the composition of this. Let's actually start watching the replay just a little bit. And we're going to watch it through Marine King's perspective here. So he's going to be jumping around a bit. You guys can kind of follow him. But what we want to look at is the composition, the theory behind this. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the tanks, right? The purpose of the tanks in this mech push is going to be to kill the sentries, make sure you don't get too screwed over by force fields. And the second purpose of these tanks is going to help versus Colossi. There's 1 or 2 Colossi with no range. These tanks are going to be great at dealing with those. The next part is the idea of this composition is if you can deal with the force fields, the Stalkers will lose to pretty much every other one of your Terran units. If you can force the Stalkers to fight your entire army, you get them pinned where they can't micro. You make sure they can't cut off some units with force fields. DPS-wise, Hellions and Marines actually do great against Stalkers. If it's just a standout brawl, this is something you can test a unit at, or you can test in a real game. The main threat is those force fields, of course, and that's what the tanks are there for. Then the next parts. the Hellion Marine composition is very good against Immortals, and it's also very good against Zealots without charge. So that's very, very, very helpful to have those in your army. And then the last part that's great about this composition, we're actually going to pause it right here, is if we look at his rally, it's 6 Hellions at a time from these 3 reactors. Very, very, very important this build. You have 3 reactors, make 6 Hellions all the time. Of course, you're making the Marines and the tanks as well. Of course, you also cut workers around 45. It's kind of an interesting point there. And he didn't actually pull any SCVs. So he just cut workers so we could do pure unit production. And the great part about the Hellions is they cross the map so fast. I mean, look at you don't see any Hellions on the map right now, right? And the reason why is because the ones that were produced have already joined the army. They're already up in the army, and they've got 4.25 movement speed, so as they fast forward this again, these Hellions are going to come out. They're just going to zip across the map instantly. I mean, it's going to take them maybe 10 seconds to cross this map, so that's very, very, very helpful. So that's the idea behind the composition. Now we're going to talk about the engagement, okay? The cool part about the engagement is the first step you get close to their base. Marine King has already accomplished this. And this is easier or harder on a couple different maps, and we're going to talk about things that Protoss can do to stop you from crossing the map. Stalkers have a hard time picking at your units because siege tanks have range 7, right? In non-siege, these are just siege mode up. Let's see if I can find one. Here's one in non-siege mode. They have range 7, and they do 25 damage armor with a fast attack rate. So it's not easy to pick at you when you have siege tanks in your army. And the other thing is that they try to pick around at your army. Your Hellions are so fast, if they ever have a section of their units that's weaker than your Hellions can run them down and kill them very, very efficiently. So it's pretty easy to cross the map with this composition. There's a couple things that can really hurt you, and that's at this point, right by their base, this is where you have to siege up. And the reason you can't cross this zone easily is because they can cut your army in half with force fields, okay? But if you look at the rest of this map, there's not really, it's mostly bigger areas and it's easy to come around from other angles. It's a very open map crossing it, right? It's very hard for them to force field your army, pick off a couple units, and then back away. And there's actually a couple different maps we can look at. Of course, people are saying Terminus, this is a map that, that we don't really see too often. So we're going to look at a couple ways to cross maps and ways to deal with force fields in just a second. Let me bring up a map of Terminus, and we're going to talk about the different movement paths you're going to take. So let's say you're the Terran here. You're over at the right side of the map right here, and your opponent is going to be over on the left side of the map right here, right? And so we're going to look at the different movement paths you can take. Uh-oh. Kind of broke this for a second. There we go. The movement paths you can take over here are going to be, let's get back to the purple. You can go through the middle right here. Let's say this is your natural, so you're safe here. What you can do is you can just go right through the middle. It's very, very open, right? And right here, if they try to force field you, right? They try to say, we're going to force field you right here. You can pretty easily work around that by just going around here. And all of a sudden, they can get stuck. And Hellions are so fast, with the siege tank shooting over the force fields, and the Hellions can come around this way too. There's a lot of different, Hellions can come around this way. There's a lot of different ways you can kind of get around them and grab a hold of them. The only part where you really can't do that is, of course, they can hold their natural part right here. But what that means is it means you can cross the map and get close to their base very fast. So that's really cool. Now let's take a look at a couple other more modern maps. Jump to a more modern map here. Let's look at Cloud Kingdom. Okay, Cloud Kingdom is a map I would not advise you to do this build on. And the reason why is because you're going to go through mech push, and all of a sudden you're going down this way, and here's a spot where you can get force fielded, right? Now we're going to use blue for the force field this time. You can get force fielded right there. And then you have to siege up the tanks, push the sentries back, and then you can continue on your quest, right? You go, oh, okay, let's continue on our quest. Let's go across this way, right? Or you could go ahead and go this way, right? But either way, whichever way you go, they can still force field you here, or they can force field you here, and you can't go around to flank them very easily. So then you have to siege up your tanks again to push those sentries back, and then finally you can either come up this way, or you can come up, go through this way. Maybe it would be right around here. And then, of course, they can force field you right here, or maybe like right here, through 2 force fields, and then again they have their last fallback point right here. So there's a lot of ways they can buy time against your push if you're doing it on Cloud Kingdom. So I would not recommend it on Cloud Kingdom. I'm like, wait a minute, you just pointed out how it works on Terminus, but no one plays that anymore. Doesn't work on Cloud Kingdom. But let's take a look at a different modern map. let's move over to Ohana, okay? And if you take a look at Ohana, different paths you can take, let's say you're red, you're spawned to bottom right. Of course, you're natural, they can't force field Dax, you have tanks there, right? And whichever way you cross here, right? Let's say your opponent tries to force field you here or here. Whichever one they force field, you can come around on the other side. If they force field here, you can come around this way, right? If they force field there, you can come around this way. So whichever way you can circle around and get past them. And then these areas are actually pretty open, right? That's pretty open. You can just head around through here. This is actually pretty open. You can head around straight through there. And then basically this is open too. So you don't have to worry about any of this area. It's all really open. And basically the only spot they can force field you is really going to give you trouble is on your natural. So again, it's just like Terminus where the only thing you have to worry about being attacked is basically once you get to your natural. So it can work on a lot of maps. You can kind of study the maps and choose which ones to do this timing on. But now let's talk about what happens once you get to their natural. So we're going to jump back in the game. And this is where the next important part comes in. This is where, since you're worried if you stay in unsiege mode, they can cut your army in half with force fields, and all of a sudden you're in trouble. So you have to leapfrog the tanks. We're going to watch what MC does here. And what MC does, Marine King does against MC, he's going to be leapfrogging his tanks. So he sieges 3 up, right? And then he's going to unsiege 2, keep 1 siege so his opponent can't come in and force those guys half. Move him up a bit, siege him up again. And he's going to keep doing that. Unsiege a few, move him up, siege the rest. Meanwhile, constantly rallying in more reinforcements. These Hellions are zipping across the map. Here's another crew of Hellions coming in here. And then as soon as his opponent, he sees an opening, he's leapfrogging up, but he doesn't have to wait for the tanks. There's an opening on his opponent. So he can come in here with the Blue Flame Hellions. He's just going to absolutely destroy his opponent. Of course, you saw there, as soon as MC tried to force field and get the Zealots in, the tanks were just in range. They could blow up those Zealots very, 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 very quickly. And then, of course, this is just such a strong composition if you don't have to worry too much about those force fields. MC doesn't even know where to put force fields against the army at this point. Another point is people are talking about Blink Stalker flanks. So this game, what MC did is he blinked down and tried to flank with his Blink Stalkers. But without force field support, Blink Stalkers are bad against siege tanks, and they're also kind of bad against Marines as long as Marines can cover the siege tanks. So as you see here, yeah, he can take down 1 tank, but all these Stalkers are getting mauled by the siege mode damage. He blinks in again, focuses down 1 more tank. But now he's out of Stalkers. So, yeah, if they have Blink, they can blink on your tanks and kill 1 or 2. But meanwhile, it's not a good position for them because they lose so many more Blink Stalkers and they can kill tanks. So, that's why it's really kind of a great map, I think. A great strategy, I think, against something like a Blink Stalker, upgraded, Immortal Zealot-centric composition. Because the Blink Stalkers are weak to Marines and Hellions, and they're only great against tanks when they severely outnumber them. And then, of course, the Marines and Hellions are great against the rest of the composition. So now we ask the question, can this build become standard? Okay, and this is a situation where you have to say, oh, it looked great here, but what if my opponent did different things, right? And the first thing to ask is, what if he made Colossi? He had 4 siege tanks. A no-range Colossi is not a threat. But if he rushes out range Colossi, hitting the 12 minutes, he can have probably about 3 range Colossi out. That could be a little bit problematic. It depends on how you market the tanks, but if they rush towards Colossi and they have a large gateway support army, that's where you might run into trouble because Colossi are really the main counter to Hellions. If they do like Colossi and upgrades so the gateway support is light, I think you're going to be in great position. Or if they go like very common nowadays is that like heavily upgraded style with all the forges to get those gateway units. That could be a little bit great for you, excuse me, because the upgrades don't really matter, right? You got mostly Blue Flame Hellion siege tanks. Their damage is so high, armor upgrades aren't very important versus them, and of course, you're not worried about their attack damage too much either. So it's great against those heavily upgraded strategies. It's a little bit weak against Colossi and Blink Stalkers because Colossi kill the Hellions, and then if you lose your Hellion Marine support, then the Blink Stalkers can kind of overwhelm your tanks. They can cut off reinforcements. That's really the only build that you have to be too worried about. But I think it actually could be a great build to mix in every once in a while. We've seen Marine King mix it in here, and I've seen actually other Pro Terrans mix it in occasionally in tournaments. Of course, it's only mixing occasionally because most people feel confident in their standard play enough against Protoss that they don't need to mix in these builds. But I think if we see Terrans have a weak TVP, they'll start mixing in builds like this a little more often because it's a great timing to try to exploit an opponent who's going for fast upgrades, maybe against a player like Creator Prime or something like that. So I hope this timing is really fun for you guys. Remember, MLG.TV has the VODs. The replay of this game will be in that VOD description when it's released in a couple hours. Thanks for watching this. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to our next segment, which is going to be using a Nidus to defend against a timing attack.